Hello everyone, welcome for block 2 of our research for task 1. If the first research session focused mostly on why schools do implement online classes, it's probably also important to look at why schools do not look at online classes. So let's open a new tab here and let's look at disadvantages of online classes. Hopefully we'll be able to look at disadvantages of online classes. That's interesting. Let's pause for a moment and come back to this. And we're back. So look at some disadvantages here. Let's also narrow the search to K-12 institutions. Alright, so we've got a few sources to navigate here. Let's get onward with doing that. Okay, so student guide. What inherent in this student guide is the idea that students need to develop more discipline, and perhaps that's not appropriate for students at some age. So it says, excuse me. And while it comes from a college website, it's probably definitely true for high school students as well. That more discipline is necessary to complete the course, but might not be present in all of them. Don't like that as a source. Didn't seem very well written. Um, Sometimes a danger of getting Google searches, I suppose. Looking at colleges here, maybe worth looking at, even though it's not narrow to K-12. Okay. Nothing much worth looking at here. It's more anecdotal stuff, but nothing concrete. Okay, so we're looking at a different source here. Okay, so we've seen a few disadvantages here as well. Obviously, I suppose one reason schools don't implement it is because unions oppose it. Here in Iowa, we're looking at an example of unions opposing it because they view it as trading technology for teachers. So, in other words, sometimes online programs get paid for by cutting costs, or by cutting teachers, rather. So, um, one reason not to implement would be actual teacher opposition. Okay, there's also a doubt about their rigor and, as we talked about, academic honesty as well. And effectiveness of the courses. Okay, so we're looking at options here. So it looks as though sometimes um, part of the reason the jury's still out is that the data is still unclear about whether or not virtual schools are ready and the or virtual schools are effective. And this brings up valid points that sometimes the data points used to measure effectiveness of schools aren't necessarily uh, good data points to begin the conversation from. So, for example, um, there's they there's a dismal outlook here of performance at online schools operated by K-12, one of the biggest providers in the country. But it doesn't compare to how students who take online courses would have performed in their home schools. So in other words, it's not a valid statistical comparison. Um, a more valid comparison would be comparing that student's performance to what they would have gotten in their to other students in their home district, rather than the students statewide. So it stands to reason, and obviously the numbers and demographics aren't in front of me here, but students perhaps from a disadvantaged community, um, their parents might opt for a online program, and because that student might not be ready to perform academically well anyway, um, their scores might fall well below state averages, and so you could use that. You could definitely use that data to say online schools aren't doing their job, but you could also say that if that student performed better than their local district average, then the online school is doing their job. So two ways looking at the same coin here and making the data say what you want it to say, essentially. Right. So valuable information here, but it doesn't go through everything. Um, let's explore one thing that came up earlier was the multi-district online courses. Let's explore some alternatives there. Let's refine a little bit with the advantages of multi-district. I wish I could type today. There we go. Okay. So you've got a few sources here that might be worth looking at, like this as well. All right. So Colorado's got quite the extensive network here of online schools. Um, what's interesting here might be to look at some of their data, what they see compared to traditional students. Hopefully, the website provides that. Okay, this is quite neat. All right, so are we just looking at trying to figure out what our data set is here exactly? Okay, that's not going to happen. This site apparently compares Colorado's schools, which is certainly neat, but not entirely useful. Oh, what are these blue schools? We might need to go back and find some names here. So let's look at college pathways and see if we can find that on the list here. So we see here those schools are both performing well. I believe our blue bubbles here are our online courses. All right, so we see there's a mixed results here. So suppose just like anything else, it depends on the online program. This is still a neat way to provide school data, though, and I wish Michigan had something like this. Um, but on the whole, if this is the 50th percentile, the majority of these online programs are doing as well or better than some of their counterparts. So while we can't necessarily quote anything specifically, it's interesting to note that. We'll save that link if we need to come back to it later in our writing. General online schools. Okay. So we're looking more at Colorado. Colorado appears to be a leader in our uh, online education. Um, Talks about their progress here on the report, but not necessarily about results yet. See if their questions and answers have anything to say about it, though. All right, so let's look at what there is to be said about virtual schools here. Right, so there are charter schools are leading the way here. So maybe that's an influence here. Um, if the majority of online schools are charter schools, I don't know what that says yet, but it's certainly something to think about. Perhaps because obviously they're not subject to local control and things like that, or at the same degree of local control that these schools are feel more free. So maybe one of the barriers here to implementing online courses is school boards and things like that too, and attitudes toward online learning. Okay, so we're looking at different ways to things here. Nothing we haven't seen already as far as um, positives of online learning. Right, so while useful, not terribly so. Okay, so it looks at student transients. Um, I don't know if that's germane to our conversation. So we're looking at a lobbying website here. Um, Nothing, again, talking about that pokes holes in online learning. Let's go back and refine our search terms some. So, articles we've seen before, not necessarily what we're looking for. Um, we know that there's PD issues. We know that there's teacher resistance and things like that to online learning. So while useful, in that we've seen those sources in other articles, it doesn't add anything new to our conversation, I suppose. All right. So let's see what else we can do. We did talk some about school boards. Let's see what this comes up with. Attitudes toward online education, so that's probably useful. Hmm, not sure we're seeing anything that gives me exactly what I want here. Let's look at this Kansas Policy Institute paper and see what we can figure out. Okay, so we'll find some reasons here. Look at some objections. So this could be useful here. Pages 5 and 10 mostly. Okay, so we're looking at definitions here. Nothing that's new to us. Um, so, so reasons for online learning. The first, teachers or AP courses. Works around scheduling conflicts. All right, so let's chalk these up as reasons supporting online schooling. Or why students choose to use online schooling. Okay, so we've got a few questions here. Bats looking at here. So there's some problems. So we're looking at different myths here, I guess, but so a lot of the things, okay, so some of the methods here that, or some of the reasons that schools don't include them are located right here. Of course, we have the PD issue. I believe I copied and pasted that twice. All right, let's try that one more time. Weird that I could copy and paste from above, but not from this section of the paper. But in general, the argument is that some teachers need PD. Another barrier, of course, being do students have access to technology? I guess one would question the utility if a student were to come to school just for an online course. It would, I guess, technology in that case could help to supplement education. Um, but if so, you'd be looking at more of a hybrid environment. If you were using technology just inside school, it'd be tougher to flip the learning environment. What other barriers exist here? Um, so it could be disenfranchising to the poor. Like one of the things, so some people perceive that the cost of online learning is more than classroom learning. We've seen that debunked in other sources here, but it is let's mark that as a barrier. Let's make that look all nice and neat. Well, ish. All right. Okay, that is not helpful. All right. Um, Maybe it's important to look at the process of how schools choose to implement online learning, or what the decision tree looks like, to see the school board involvement, or to see how different stakeholders might interfere or accelerate the process. Okay, we're seeing lots of things that don't necessarily um, relate to this, but let's see what these sources did yield. Okay, so we're seeing that it implements it, but doesn't tell me necessarily why. Um, hmm. Looking at a little bit of blog posting here, not necessarily anything substantial, but could add to our conversation. Let's see what the related link here says. Okay, so we're still seeing a doubt as to whether or not charter schools are successful, but they are receiving a lot of public funds. So that might be this one here. So one of the barriers again is still teacher opposition and public opposition. Private organizations run schools but receive public funds. And something that really hasn't been tested yet. Okay. School problem isn't necessarily helpful to us. Let's see what we can add here in our last few minutes of research. All right. So we've looked at a number of things. We've looked at school board attitudes. We've looked at that. I still want to know more about the process, though. Looking at colleges, nursing, and things like that. So again, not K-12 related. Our topic kind of narrows itself to just looking at K-12, so I don't think it's appropriate to look at post-secondary or even business implementations here. These are more guidelines. Let's try broadening the search. Okay, we're still looking at online courses here. I want to go back to this, though, as well. Particularly interested in this Colorado piece here because of the wealth we've seen in Colorado so far. So again, we're looking at funding here. Not necessarily relevant to our discussion, but perhaps looking at adoption cycles and things like that might be useful. Twelve-year adoption cycle is pretty broad. I don't know how they can say they review things every 7 years with that gap there. But I digress. Do we talk about online courses here? Nothing really. That would have been key to no. not too helpful here, as it talks a little bit about, again, the adoption process here. But obviously, that San Diego is a little more forward thinking here, and that they've developed all this stuff. What I really want to figure out is um, maybe school board minutes for online adaptation. Maybe that should be our final search term here. I'm trying to link those together. Let's get there. That was not multiple tabs. Let's go back and try that and see if we can find some of these things here. I'd like to find agendas that link specifically to online education, though. Sifting through that does not sound outstanding. Okay. Alright, nothing here that helps us out as far as the online learning. A little bit stumped here is to figure out what's next. I want a way to quickly search these things. Let's try one more link here before we try and refine the search. Let's try a different link here so we're not burning all our time. School boards. Try this last term, see what comes up. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like we've gotten anything that's entirely different. In any case, though, we're done with session 2. Thanks for watching.